Princeton, Indiana, a quiet, friendly city. Population over 11,000 and growing. It's a typical county seat in the United States of America. That's the Gibson County Courthouse. Sheriff Holland's office is there. The people of Princeton are proud of their comfortable homes, proud of their industrial development, proud of their patriotism, and proud of their record for industrial peace. It's hardly the scene or the setting you'd expect as the background for a monstrous lie. This is Al Hayes, president of the International Association of Machinists. He is speaking from his office in Washington, D.C.
Labor unions have been an important part of American life ever since colonial days, when this country was a British colony. Back in the days of Bunker Hill and Paul Revere, there was a strike in Boston. Some cordwainers, they were shoemakers, quit work because their piece rates had been reduced. From that day to this, labor unions have been the subject of bitter attack by many of the owners and managers of business and industry and their emissaries. They have used every means known to man, fair or foul, true or false, to undermine and obstruct the labor movement. Those who strive to obstruct the justice with unions are seldom scrupulous in the methods they use. Recently, a motion picture has been produced by an anti-labor group seeking support for so-called right-to-work legislation. And this anti-labor film portrays union members as less responsible, less lawful, less ethical, less moral than their neighbors, than the average American. And like all propaganda, this so-called right-to-work film is based on a partial truth. It pretends to tell the story of a strike by members of the Machinist Union. That strike took place in Princeton, Indiana, in the winter of 1957. And some of the events in the anti-union film do coincide with the events during the strike. But the film is cleverly salted with fictitious events that never occurred, with distortions and with outright falsehoods. Actually, that film is really fiction. The parts are played by actors. I doubt whether any one of them has ever been in Princeton. With all of its falsehoods, this film is being shown to high school students, to television audiences, and to employees in industry to mislead them. And for that reason, I have asked Gordon Cole to go to Princeton with a camera crew to set the record straight. I want you to hear the real story.
Mr. Hayes has told you that the anti-labor film was performed by professional actors on location. That's the big difference between that film and the one you are about to see. Our camera crew took pictures of the real people of Princeton and recorded their statements. Those who appear in our film did so voluntarily. They were not paid in any way, except that those who lost time at work on the day we made the film were reimbursed. These people have seen the Right to Work film, but let them tell you what they think of it. This is their story. Princeton has a fine record of industrial peace. One of its unions is Machinist Local Lodge 1459. This local became bargaining representative here in 1947 after a secret ballot election. The company is bigger today. 80% of the employees are women. 80% of the union membership at the time of the strike were women. In the anti-union film which you see here, the impression is created that the majority of the workers were men and that a labor union brings trouble, fear, and turmoil into a community. In the anti-labor film, this is how the president of the local union is shown.
They want me out of the way.
But what about this contract breaking business, Hallie?
Don't mean a thing. Just a technicality.
Yes, but...
I tell you, it don't mean a thing. And I'm going to tell
A
you
burly,
once more.
headstrong young man, singularly lacking in good sense. Now I want you to meet the person who was really president of the local at the time of the strike. Her name is Ruth Monroe. Then she was 59, and her eyes had just begun to go bad. Mrs. Monroe, you were shop chairman for 10 years before you were elected president, I believe.
I was. I was elected president in 1955.
The anti-labor film doesn't show any women officers of this local. What was the real situation?
7 of the 10 officers were women, including the president, vice president, financial secretary, recording secretary, and treasurer.
Mrs. Monroe, you've seen the Right to Work film. What do you think of it?
It's a lie. I was born and raised in this town, and I can see well enough to know that there were only 2 or 3 shots in the whole picture that were actually taken in Princeton.
Well, tell us what happened to cause strike after so many years of good relations in this plant.
Well, a national company from the East bought out the company, and they brought in a Eastern industrial relations manager who started changing everything. Rules, regulations, time studies, anything you wanted to do. And the people felt that they were being worked upon in the wrong way, and that the contract was being violated every day. They were being forced to arbitration on all their grievances. They had stacked up, and they were forced to arbitration on any of them to get a settlement. Then I was fired.
Well, the anti-labor film shows the local president railroading the strike because he got fired. What really happened?
Well, that is just the reverse. I told them not to strike if they were striking for me, because I'm big and old and ugly enough to take care of myself. If they were striking because of the violations of their contract, to think long and hard before taking a strike vote.
What was the vote?
After all of the discussion on the floor, all but 9 voted to strike.
In the anti-labor film, the strike was voted by a small committee with only 11 members present. Count them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11.
Take us for anyway.
Mary Rogers was a member of the shop committee in 1957. Mary was present at the meeting. Mary, will you describe the meeting for us? How many members were there?
There were about 400 members there.
Well, in the other film, the 11 present met in a small committee room. Where was the meeting really held?
It was held in the National Guard Armory in Princeton, the largest meeting hall there.
Do you recall this scene from the other film?
The next morning, when the men and women arrived at the plant where many of the people in our town are employed, the place was picketed. It was a complete surprise to everyone, except the handful who had been invited to the special union meeting.
Quote, except the handful who had been invited to the special union meeting, unquote.
That is an absolute lie. Everybody was notified. Not only was it posted on the plant bulletin board, it was also announced on the local radio station.
Do you remember what the vote was?
Yes, all but 9 of the about 400 present voted to strike.
In the anti-labor film, the charge is made that the Princeton strike was a wildcat. Dorothy Brines and Conrad Stinson were members of the strike committee. Dorothy, was it a wildcat?
No, it wasn't a wildcat. It was brought on by the company. They refused to process their grievances. They re-time studied the jobs where the people couldn't make any money. We feel that they violated our contract. On top of that, Ruth Monroe was fired when she went to St. Louis, have her eyes examined, and it seemed like we had no other choice.
Gordon, what they mean by wildcat, I guess, is that the International Union wouldn't sanction the strike until they had investigated. But they did investigate, and the Executive Council voted to sanction the strikes, and they paid us strike benefits retroactive. In those days, the strike benefit per week was $10. Today, it is $25 a week.
In the anti-labor picture, the picketing scenes show most of the pickets as big, burly men acting in violence. Dolores Roney, Oma Hutchinson, and Pansy Shine were picket captains during that strike. Dolores, what have you got to say about this?
Well, no, almost all the pickets were women. And after a few days, they got a court order against us, and then we were only allowed 4 pickets to a gate during the remainder of the strike.
It was the middle of winter, and they even made us tear down our picket shelters. You can be sure we believed in what we were out for, or we wouldn't have been picketing.
One thing the anti-labor film doesn't show is the fact that a group of us pickets gave 10% of our strike donations for the March of Dimes telethon, and this came to $100.
In the anti-labor film, they talk about outside goons and strangers from out of state. Sandra Weidman was a member of the strike committee in Princeton in 1957. Sandra, did the union bring outside goons into Princeton?
No,
Did the International Union bring in outsiders?
absolutely not.
Well, then what happened?
Well, the company brought in strikebreakers from Terre Haute, Illinois, Indianapolis, and other places. There were plenty of them.
This is Father Charles Shuttlecotty, Director of Catholic Charities at nearby Evansville. Father, I understand that you were asked to arbitrate the dispute during the strike at Princeton in 1957.
That's right, Mr. Cole. There were a number of the labor people came down to my office one day and asked whether I would come up to arbitrate the case. And I told them that I would, so I had a chat with them and thought I got the picture pretty well from them, from their viewpoint, and then called on management at the plant. Management was very courteous. However, they were not willing to arbitrate. In other words, they weren't interested in having some outsider weigh the facts on both sides and come up with a...
Settle the dispute on its merits.
That's right.
Thank you, Father.
You're welcome, Mr. Cole. Thank you.
This is Reverend Clayton, pastor of the Bethel Memorial Church at Princeton. Pastor Clayton, I'm told that a good many members of the union are in your congregation.
Yes, we have a number of union people that attend our church, and they're very fine Christian people.
But what do the law enforcement officers at Princeton say about the union? This is Sheriff Holland. He was sheriff of Gibson County at the time of the strike. The sheriff has been a law officer in Gibson County for a good many years. He knows most of the people here. Sheriff, do the union members give you any trouble?
None whatever, no.
To your knowledge, during the strike, did the union bring in any out-of-state goons?
No, not that I know of.
Well, during the strike, somebody, some insane criminal, shot up a trailer, hitting a 4-month-old baby. Was that criminal ever caught?
Never was, no.
Was there ever any evidence to connect that shooting with the union in any way?
No.
I believe that both the company and the union offered a reward, didn't they?
They did, yes.
And that reward was never claimed?
Never was, no.
In the anti-labor film, the tragic shooting of the baby climaxes the story. It is described as a sacrifice to union violence. The inference is clear that the shooting was the work of the strikers. This is Ronald Russell, the baby's father. I think you will want to hear what he has to say. Mr. Russell, how old is your daughter now?
She's 5 years old.
And how is her health?
Good. At least she's under observation, and we're hoping for the best.
Will you tell us whether there was any evidence that connected the shooting with the union?
No evidence to my knowledge, no. No evidence at all.
The strike continued for 2 weeks after that tragedy. Settlement was finally negotiated in March of 1957. During those last weeks of the strike, the Indiana legislature debated and adopted a so-called right-to-work law. In the anti-labor film, the impression is left that everybody in Princeton favored that law. The Princeton Gazette is shown several times. Of course, there is no such newspaper in Princeton. The real newspaper in Princeton, the only daily in the city, is the Princeton Clarion, which we see here. The Clarion opposed adoption of the so-called right-to-work bill. Said the Clarion in an editorial at that time, quote, "We just can't see how we can have divided work crews, some union, some non-union, working in the same plant," unquote. And again, in the same editorial, quote, "We feel that the present right-to-work proposal is destructive in its ultimate intent. That is why we oppose it," unquote. Doyle Day was a part of the strike in 1957. Today, he is president of Local Lodge 1459. Brother Day, when did the ladies decide to elect a man as their president?
3 years ago, but I was elected last year.
What has happened in the plant since the strike?
We went back in March of 1957. Since then, we haven't lost a day's work. Conditions are better, and there's more work in the plant.
What about wages?
Since the strike, the union has secured 4 wage increases in negotiations.
4 wage increases without the loss of a day's work. Then your relations with the company are good.
Relations are very good. That's why I've asked that the name of the company not be used in this film.
How many of the employees belong to the union now?
All but 7. We would like everybody to belong. We feel like that when everybody belongs, everybody has a chance to speak on the issues, everyone has a chance to vote. We feel like that when everybody belongs, everybody benefits.
Yes, when everybody belongs to the union, everybody benefits. But there are always those who discourage employees from joining unions. Usually they do it for selfish reasons or sometimes from ignorance. And such persons or groups are thus preventing the non-union employee from having a voice and a vote regarding his own welfare. Today, we in the United States enjoy the highest standard of living the world has ever known. No amount of misleading anti-labor propaganda has been able to conceal the great contribution labor unions have made in raising the living standards of the working people of our country. Through union membership, we have made our plant or our shop a better place in which to work. Through union membership, we have made our job a better job, our life a better life. The average American is fair and objective when conversant with the facts. We have given you the facts in this film. On the basis of all of the facts, it is indisputable that a free labor movement is a prerequisite to any free society.